If you run a mobile glamping business, there is a good chance that you have already or will in the future get a request to set up your tent indoors, on concrete, or on AstroTurf or fake grass. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how I recently set up my Canvas Camp 4.5 meter canvas bell tent on turf without puncturing into the turf. So if that interests you, keep on watching. Let's get into it. If you don't know me, hey, my name is Kenny. I am the owner of Pitched Glamping, and I bootstrapped my business back in 2020, and business is still growing. Things are going well, and I just want to use this platform as an opportunity to just help you grow your mobile glamping business. So let's get into how exactly you can set up your bell tent or your tent on turf, concrete, or indoors without the use of stakes for staking into the ground, because in some scenarios it's just not possible when you're indoors or setting up on concrete or turf. So before we get into the details, I want to preface this video that if you are setting up your tent in the outdoors, that would be like on concrete or on AstroTurf, I do not recommend setting up your tent without the use of stakes if there is any strong winds or if there is rain that is going to be occurring, specifically strong rain, that like a storm. I highly do not recommend that. We set up this setup that I recently did that I'm going to show you in just a minute was set up in beautiful sunshine. Now there was a storm that was projected to come in, so I took a couple extra precautions, but for the most part it was sunshine. So just take that in consideration when you're considering putting up your bell tent or any kind of tent structure without the use of stakes. So if a customer reaches out to you and they are requesting to set up their tent outdoors, specifically on turf or on concrete, I strongly recommend first going to getting their address or getting pictures of their yard. When they reach out, say, hey, we can possibly do this. Don't guarantee anything until you see the space. And that's indoors as well. You want to see the space and see what you're working with. If you're looking at setting up it outdoors, this is what I do. I go to Google Maps and I type in an address, and that for now I'm just going to use the Phoenix. This is where I'm based. And until we find a place, you're going to go to that satellite view, and then again, this is not a specific address that I have ever set up at. I'm just looking for a place that I can give you as an example. So what you'll look at here is you'll see a lot of like light green, kind of brown grasses. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for like a rich green grass like this. This is turf. This right here is as turfy gets, because you can compare that to the neighbors. This is rich dark green. This is going to be turf. You cannot put stakes into turf. It's not recommended. You can damage the turf. But that's in the front yard. So we want to look for a place in the backyard. So I'm looking around here, and look, this looks like a kind of a side kind of backyard kind of thing. So like, this is kind of like on a cul-de-sac. So someone may have put a tent right here. It looks like a pretty safe neighborhood. What I'm looking for is, can I put stakes potentially around the outside perimeter? Or in some capacity, where can I tie off the ropes to support this tent? In that scenario, you can see that there is stuff around the perimeter of the tent. It looks like there's greenery, shrubs. Then you can stake into that. So that's a good sign. This is how I do it. Is I typically request and require that we have at least 6 or 7 spots that we can stake in the tent. I have never set up a tent with only using sandbags for a couple reasons. One, just the liability of setting up a tent when someone can trip over the rope, or someone can move the support bags, and that could actually cause the tent to tumble over. So there's just some safety things that I do not feel comfortable with in setting up with just the use of sandbags, unless there's some extremely heavy sandbags. So I'll show you kind of exactly what I do here. I have some video of the tent that I recently set up. I'll walk you through my thought process, and I'll walk you through what tools I use and how I think about the space, so that you can apply that to your next or upcoming event that you may have to utilize setting up on turf or concrete or indoors. So here's the space that I recently set up this tent in. This was actually after I picked up the tent, all the insides cleared out, and I was like, hey, I should record a video on this. So here's the space. You'll see that there are the tent looks pitched well, like everything is all taut, everything's pulled out really nicely. But this setup is utilizing both sand support, sandbags, as well as the use of stakes for the outside perimeter of this tent. Now, I'll give you a little bit more insight onto what we do here. So, again, this is the tent here. The bottom of this tent is not staked in at all. So you'll see that there is the standard support ropes that extend from the outside, the top of the canvas, or the top of the canvas walls, but the bottom there's no stakes there. So this is just completely like sitting flat. There's nothing weighting it down. There's not even beds in here. So what you'll notice is all the stakes on the outside are all the ropes are staked into the rocks around the perimeter of the tent, except the back ones that you see here. So there was 3 spots that I did not stake into the ground. So again, we're going to the left side of the tent now. You'll see that there's a top rope extending down from the top of the wall, and there's a rope at the bottom. The reason being is that the front door, where people pull open up and zip up the tent, is a lot of times where the most tension is and where people can actually move around the tent the most. Also, if it gets windy, that front door acts like a sail. So around the whole perimeter of the tent is a rope that is staked into the concrete, and then around the backside, I have these 25-pound sandbags with a carabiner clip attached to the support rope. Typically, we would have like covers for these. I didn't have them on this one. I made a mistake. But again, it was in the back, so it wasn't really an eyesore. Now, if you had to do something like this indoors, this is where you would likely have to utilize sandbags around the entire perimeter. You can get these sandbags. They're like relatively inexpensive. You can fill them up. They seal closed. They're relatively lightweight, and if you get a wagon like this, you can set them on there. You can wheel them around and put them where you need to put them. They are a little bit of a nuisance, so I would highly recommend, if you do sand supports a lot around these tents, or if you put it indoors, I highly recommend putting an additional fee for the sand supports, because one, they are additional labor time. They're also additional fuel time because they are heavy. So if you have a 25 to 50 pound sandbag and you do that times 10 or 12, depending on the size of your tent, well, that's 500 to 600 pounds that you have to transport. That's a lot of work to do that, to load it in the van, unload it into a wagon, unload it onto the tent, load it back on the wagon, back into your tent, and back into your facility. That is a lot of additional time, labor, energy, effort. Please do yourself a favor and charge for this additional service, because it is an additional service. Though you're doing the tent and you want that business, it is a lot of work to transport and haul these sandbags. It's a lot of manual labor. So highly recommend doing that. Hope that gives you a good idea in terms of what's possible. I have the sandbags that I use linked down below. You can check those out, or you can find something a little bit more bigger, durable. I have really liked these ones. They do occasionally have like a little bit of sand pour out of them, but pinch it and then it's fine, it's done. But there is something important to know, that when you are setting up a tent without staking down the bottom of the tent first, you need to change up how it is that you actually set up this tent. So I'm going to walk you through the process of setting up this tent without first staking down the bottom of the tent. All right, the first thing that you need to do is first you need to lay out the tent. When you lay out the tent, you're going to get it all nice and flat. And then what you're going to do is you're going to put the support ropes where they need to be, and you're actually going to stake them into the ground very loosely. You don't want these to be super tight. You want a lot of slack in the rope, but and then you can attach this either to a stake if you're using staking to the ground, or you can attach this to a support sandbag. But I highly recommend lay out the tent first and then set out all the support ropes and all the support stakes where they would normally go if you were setting up a tent. Then you put in the center pole, then you put up the A-frame pole, and then what you do is you go around and you tighten the doors first. You tighten the 2 support ropes that are next to the door first, and then you go around the entire perimeter, taking away some of the slack from the ropes. I'd always recommend not over tightening them when you first go around, because that can cause the tent to be a little bit lopsided, but loosely pull the tension out of those support ropes, and then what you should have at the end is a nicely supported tent without the need for staking in the bottom of the tent. Hope that was helpful. If you have questions about this process, please let me know. You can drop them down in the comments. Otherwise, if you want more information about starting a mobile glamping business, you can check the links down below. If you are a rental business owner and you just rent out a bunch of stuff, or like tents or chairs or cameras or any kind of things like that, be sure to hit the subscribe button, and love to have you part of the rental business owner community. I'll see you in the next video.